You're listening to the No Bullshit Vegan Podcast, episode 194. I speak with registered dietitian and author Brenda Davis about fine-tuning plant-based diets to promote optimal health at every stage of life.
Welcome to the No Bullshit Vegan Podcast. Myth-busting and evidence-based advice to help you kick butt with your health and fitness on a vegan diet. Here's your host, Karina Inkster.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Karina, your go-to no BS vegan fitness and nutrition coach. Thanks so much for joining me today. In our last episode, I shared how in our fitness and nutrition coaching practice, my team and I work on getting clients to life after coaching, where they're self-sufficient and confident, and they've built bulletproof habits. And in that episode, I shared our client Steph's message about how she's now going off on her own, building her own workouts. She's on track and consistent with her nutrition, and she's just generally kicking ass. Well, today we have another awesome client, Yuval, graduating, in quotes, from our coaching. So he says, "Dear coaches Karina and Zoe, I'd like to thank you for the transformative year in which I trained with you. I learned so much from you both about weight loss, nutrition, and working out. I developed some solid habits, became much more aware of my nutritional needs, and most importantly, remained consistent even after blows by jumping back on the wagon. Your support and guidance throughout this period was very helpful. I wish you both all the best and many future successes with other vegan trainees. Much love and appreciation, Yuval." Huge congrats to Yuval. He's made some incredible progress and should be super proud of himself. Now, if you're considering leveling up your fitness and plant-based nutrition and getting to a point where you don't need coaching anymore, check out and apply for our coaching programs at karinainkster.com/coaching. That's karinainkster.com/coaching. Introducing my guest today, Brenda Davis. A registered dietitian, Brenda is a plant-based trailblazer and an internationally acclaimed speaker. She has been a featured speaker at medical, nutrition, and dietetic conferences in 25 countries on 6 continents. As a prolific nutrition writer, Brenda has authored or co-authored 13 books with over 1 million copies in print in 9 languages. Her latest book, Plant Powered Protein, which was co-authored with my last podcast guest, Visanto Molina, was released in 2023. Brenda has also authored and co-authored numerous professional and lay articles and is a past chair of the Vegetarian Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Brenda was the lead dietitian in a diabetes randomized controlled trial in the Marshall Islands. In 2022, she was the 7th recipient of the Plantrition Project's Luminary Award. Brenda lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Brenda's favorite meal is a Buddha bowl with a rainbow of veggies, tofu, sprouts, and spicy peanut sauce. And that actually sounds like the exact meal I had yesterday at the Gumboot restaurant in Roberts Creek on the Sunshine Coast of BC. My music performance partner and I traveled down there from Powell River for a rehearsal with our tango band. And my one non-negotiable item we have to do every time is get a Buddha bowl with peanut sauce from the Gumboot. Here's my conversation with Brenda. Hi, Brenda. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, hi, Karina. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you. It's kind of weird that we haven't connected face-to-face yet. I feel like you've been on my radar for so many years.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited. So for me, it's just so wonderful to see so many people who are so passionate about this subject area and doing so much to educate the world. So thank you for your part in that.
Of course. Well, thank you for speaking with me. Let's jump right into your vegan story because you have been vegan for almost as long as I've been alive, not to date you or anything.
You can date me. It was my 66th birthday yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So.
Well, happy belated. That's so cool.
Thank you.
So, I'm 38 and you've been vegan for 36 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, you're the same age. Really, my son is 37 and my daughter's 40. So
there you go.
You're right in there.
Right in there. So 36 years ago, what happened to change Brenda's mind or the way she eats? What's the deal?
It's actually quite a story. So, when I was in high school, I just got quite passionate about nutrition, and I I was very interested in vegetarian diets, but to be honest, I thought they were kind of a practical impossibility. I lived in Northern Ontario. I had only met one real live vegetarian in my whole life. He was my grade 8 science teacher. My dad used to teach across the hall from him, and my dad thought he was insane for wanting to raise his children without hamburgers. It just seemed like quite a stretch. And then I went to university to study nutrition. And I learned two things about vegetarian diets in university. Well, one about vegetarian, one about vegan. Vegetarian diets are risky, especially for children and pregnant women. And vegan diets are just downright dangerous for everyone.
Yeah, was the going knowledge at the time.
So this is well over 40 years ago.
Right.
And our textbooks, vegetarian diets are in the fad diet section of the textbook. And then I became a registered dietitian. I, went through my internship with Health Canada. And I remember, still being so interested in this idea, this concept of surviving without consuming animal products. It stayed on my radar, even though during university, it was kind of like a slap on the wrist for even thinking about it. Mm-hmm. But, being really interested in health and disease, I found myself and my husband, I was married in 1978. So myself and my husband, we were, sort of shifting naturally towards, we ate tofu, we ate lentils before it was a cool thing to do. And so we found ourselves just kind of shifting in that direction, and we were eating less and less meat. And he was very interested in the environment. And I'll tell you the story that actually, really pushed me over the edge. And it was a day that our best friend, who's still one of our best friends in the whole world, was on his way deer hunting. And he wanted to stop by for coffee. And I thought, as he's driving, towards our place, my husband was at work. I thought, I'm going to try to convince him not to kill another deer. Mm-hmm. So, I got into this conversation with him about it. And I said, I don't get it. It's not like a sport. In sports, both teams have the same equipment. You're going in with a big gun. The deer, he or she doesn't even have a hope against you. And it was his response to me that actually changed the course of my life.
Interesting.
Yeah. He said, just because you don't have the guts to pull the trigger does not mean you are not responsible for the trigger being pulled every time you buy a piece of meat camouflaged in cellophane in the grocery store. Mm-hmm. He said, at least the animals I eat have had a life. He said, you can't say the same for the ones that are sitting on your plate.
Wow.
And it was the first time anybody had ever challenged me to take responsibility for the food that I was buying in the grocery store. Mm-hmm. We're so far removed from the original source. Mm-hmm. And it really challenged me. And I thought to myself, I need to learn more about where the animals I'm eating are coming from, even though I've reduced my consumption. I started ordering animal agriculture magazine journal articles, I should say, and reading books and just trying to learn what I could learn. And it took me about a week to say, I'm just not doing this anymore. I can't be part of this system of cruelty anymore. I just can't. And I was a public health nutritionist. Everything that I was teaching was around Canada's food guide. And at that time, we had a circle with 4 equal sections, 2 of which on the top were animal products. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine that was the basis of the nutrition education that I was doing. I can remember thinking, how can I continue in this profession when that's the foundation? What am I going to do? Am I going to have to leave and do something else? And I remember making the decision consciously, and it was not easy, but I made the decision that I had to stay and try to change things from within Because if I left and everybody who kind of saw this bigger picture just left, what would ever change?
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember saying to my husband that I would like to become vegetarian. Our children were 4 and 1 at the time. Corey was 1 when this happened. And I said, would you be willing to become completely vegetarian with me? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, I thought you'd never ask.
Oh, wow.
He said, I would love to be a vegetarian. He said, I've always wanted to do everything I could do to reduce my carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, there's nothing that's more powerful than eating lower on the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I'm all in. And
That's
I
amazing.
thought, wow, I made the best. We were married when I was 19 years old. So it was, I think I made a pretty good choice.
Good life choices were made that day. So did your kids grow up vegan from then on?
Well, actually, we kind of waffled a bit, to be completely honest. So I stayed pretty much vegan, but at that time you couldn't get fortified non-dairy milks.
Right,
You couldn't,
of course.
it wasn't easy. And it was so unusual to be eating that way that we allowed the kids to have, cheese pizza or whatever, so that it was easier with friends and stuff. But I think Corey was about 13 when he just said, I'm not doing that anymore.
Wow.
And so he became strictly vegan at that time and has been pretty much ever since. Our daughter married an omnivore, and she has gone a little bit in the other direction, but she's pretty much vegetarian. She eats yogurt and stuff like that, but she also has fish sometimes. So she doesn't eat meat or poultry, but it's still... for my husband and I, not easy. They live 2 blocks away, and our grandchildren, sort of eat what they want. But, our little, the oldest, 8 years old, we were in the car the other day, and she said, Grandma, I'm eating as little meat as possible, as little. And so she gets it. And that makes me really happy. And I'm, just trying to plant seeds as we're very close. We do a lot together. And so I have a feeling that she'll just keep moving in that direction as well.
Well, having you as the ultimate role model will probably play a big part in that. This is probably the first time that I've ever heard someone go vegan because of a hunter. That's never something I thought would happen.
Not the person that you would guess would cause you to, push you over the edge. But it was really powerful what he said to me, because it just forced me to really look at where my food was coming from. And I just thought, when I did, and then you wouldn't believe, a couple weeks later, this fellow walks in my office, and like I said, I was a public health nutritionist, with 2 books, Diet for a New America and John McDougall's Challenging Second Opinion. And he said, are these reliable resources? And I said, I just saw a review of those books not long ago. And I went and looked, and the reviews were terrible. They were just criticizing the authors because they don't have the credentials to be speaking about nutrition. And so I thought, well, I asked him, would you leave them with me and I'll read? And I, started searching a lot of their references, and it's amazing because now John Robbins, who wrote Diet for a New America, of course, is one of my dearest friends and has been for many, many years. And John McDougall became a very cherished friend as well. And I would have never, ever thought I would even have the opportunity to meet them. So that those books were very powerful resources for me too.
Okay, so my big question is, what happened to the friend/hunter?
You know what? It's this is the story. About 2 or 3 years ago, a piece of property next to his sort of waterfront property on Lake Huron became available. So he just knew the guy was going to sell it, and he phoned us and said, this place is for sale. And we said, we'll put in an offer, and we bought it. So we literally are together all summer. We share meals all the time. He's been my husband's best friend, I think, since they were like 6 years old. So they're really good buddies. He's still a hunter. He still fishes, but all of our meals together are vegan.
Uh-huh.
And they are so, like, we went out for dinner together. They could have ordered anything, and they ordered all vegan food.
Oh, good.
Like, they're just so thoughtful about it and so kind, and we just love one another. And we share lots of food. And they're, I've introduced them to a lot of things and bought them a Yonana machine to make banana ice cream. And he developed heart disease. And so they're really trying to eat more of those kinds of foods. And so it's interesting. My husband last year, they do a canoe trip together every year, and realized they were in the middle of doing this trip, realized they'd done the exact same trip exactly 50 years prior.
Oh, wow.
So it's just, it's just so
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of diehard vegans don't like hearing this, but realistically, it's going to make more of a difference to the animals and to the planet to have mass populations decrease their consumption of animal products.
Oh, absolutely.
Versus creating 1% of the population more vegans.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think we have shot ourselves in the foot, in a sense, making it like all or nothing. You have to be
100%.
Have a halo around your head and be a perfect vegan to be part of the club. And I disagree with that so much. We want to be inclusive. We want anybody that wants to shift in a plant-based direction to be embracing them, helping them, not criticizing them, but rather celebrating every little step that they take towards a more compassionate, sustainable planet. So I am on the same page as you on that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, your co-author, Visanto Molina, was just on the show.
Yes.
And so we talked a lot about your joint latest book, which is called Plant-Powered Protein. And so there's a chapter there about environmental impacts and protein choices, plant versus animal, climate change.
Yes. Well, and just to tell you, Karina, I know you're going to be interviewing my son, Corey.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote that chapter.
Yes.
That was his chapter. So that's his area of expertise.
Totally. I can't wait to talk to him about that.
Yeah. And I've written now, it's 13 books, and Visanto and I are working on our 14th with a UBC professor, Charlene Black. And it's going to be directed towards plant-based older adults or seniors.
Fantastic.
So we just keep plugging away.
You guys are institutions, like, seriously.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing. There's a reason they call you the godmother of vegan dietitians.
Oh, thank you.
So your areas of expertise from a clinical perspective, working with clients, working with populations, researching, that kind of thing, is optimizing our health and preventing and treating chronic diseases with food.
You nailed it. So the two areas that I'm interested in are, I really want people who want to be plant-based to get it right.
Right.
Because every time somebody doesn't get it right, and especially children, and, it ends up a sad story, it sets us back. Mm-hmm. And so we become exhibit number one for why people are justified eating meat. Mm-hmm. And so I really want people to do well and feel healthy and get the nutrients they need. So nutritional adequacy of plant-based diets is a passion for me. And the second is, I'm very interested in lifestyle medicine, which means, treating chronic lifestyle-induced diseases with lifestyle medicine, which includes, at the very least, a plant-strong or plant-rich diet. Mm-hmm. And I've seen over and over again people who are able to drive them, their diseases into remission, especially type 2 diabetes and heart disease particularly, but other diseases as well. Whether it's some people with cancers, some people with autoimmune diseases and so forth. And it's just remarkable to see what kind of transformation can occur when you change your diet and lifestyle. And
absolutely.
And so it's not just diet. It's about being physically fit. It's about, getting the adequate rest and having social connection and not being addicted to things. And, it's the whole 9 yards. But diet, I really view as a kingpin of lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a visual pyramid that we show to our new fitness and nutrition clients, and it just shows in a little graph the 4 most important aspects of health that we can control. There's a lot of it that
Yes.
are genetics and other
Yes.
things we can't control, right? But the things we can control on the bottom of that pyramid is nutrition. It's the foundation, it's the biggest thing when it comes to body composition, when it comes to longevity, when it comes to health. It's all nutrition. Then the other stages are things like strength training, stress management or recovery, and cardio, which are all important for
Yes.
different reasons. But nutrition is always on the bottom. But I think it's the hardest one for a lot of people.
It is, because diet is so ingrained. I mean, it's part of how we show love. It's our social connection. It's so much more than just, health and sustaining our bodies. It's just so much more. And we're impacted by, our culture, and we're impacted by so much by our families. And I can remember when my husband and I became, pretty much eliminated animal products. And our parents did not throw celebration parties, I can tell you, on either side. They were not putting their party hats on. They were really worried. We had young children.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were going to end up malnourished. They were really worried. But my dad, the thing that worried him most was that the way he showed me love was by always having and making my favorite foods. I spent 5 years in Germany when I was little. He was in the Air Force. And my favorite dinner was Wiener Schnitzel, veal cutlets.
Yikes.
With mushroom gravy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what he would make me for my birthday. And that was how, he was a very food focused person. And so when I'd come to visit, all my favorite foods would be there. And I think it made it really hard for him, because he wasn't sure how to replace that. And so there's that. It's even eating out with your family, celebrations with your family, summer barbecues. All of those things become a challenge. And so.
Well, plus we don't have a choice. We have to eat in order to survive. You can choose whether or not you're going to go lift weights or whether or not you're going to go for a run. Those are choices. But food, unless you're not going to live for the next 2 weeks, you kind of need it. It's inevitable that you're going to have to make at least some food decisions, right?
Yeah.
So I think that makes it hard for people, is that it's something we need to survive. And everything you've just mentioned, culture, the social aspect, love languages, family, that's all ingrained with nutrition.
It's all there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you work with someone, what does optimizing health mean? Like, let's say I come to you as a client. I'm looking to fine-tune my diet. I'm already vegan. What does it look like in terms of optimizing? What does that mean?
Really, what it means is to, really be your best self, to be able to function the way you want to function, to have the kind of energy you want to have the best skin health, the best reproductive health, so that you're really enjoying optimal health at every level, and that there is no nutritional deficiency potential, that we've covered all your bases, we've covered the potential shortfalls. And of course, the risk of chronic diseases, depending, of course, on how processed your diet is. If you're eating a very highly processed diet, your risk is greater than if you're eating more whole foods. But the more you go towards natural whole foods, the more you have to pay attention to certain nutrients, which might not be there in adequate amounts. So a vitamin B12, vitamin D, possibly iodine if you're not consuming seaweed or iodized salt. And then there are things like long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that omnivores would be consuming from fish. And so where are those coming from? For some people, protein, iron, and zinc, especially those that go more towards a raw diet where they're not consuming a lot of legumes. So there are all of these issues. And what I see often is there are more concerns during what we might consider the times of life where we have greater risk. So when we're children, especially small children during the preschool years, and then when we're seniors, because what happens as we grow older is we tend to eat fewer calories. We tend to be less active, but our nutritional requirements in some cases actually can increase because our ability to metabolize and absorb nutrients decreases.
Right.
And so the diet needs to be more nutrient dense in order to fulfill your requirements. But as we get older, often we're not as energetic about preparing things from scratch. We may look for convenience and compromise nutrition in the process. And so, I see senior women who come to me with various concerns where their skin is breaking and bleeding, their hair is starting to fall out, they're just having these kinds of issues and they wonder what's going on. And I analyze their diet and they're eating 35 or 40 grams of protein a day.
Yikes.
They're eating a whole food plant-based diet. They've got their steel cut oats and their almond milk and their blueberries for breakfast with some flax seeds sprinkled on top, and they might even have a nice salad at lunch, and they might have a sweet potato with a bean filling for dinner, and it's all beautiful, but their portions are small and they're not getting a lot of concentrated protein, iron, and zinc. And so when we take them from 35 or 40 grams of protein to 60 or 70 grams of protein, things start to resolve really rapidly, and they're shocked. Because in the plant-based world, what we tend, have as a mantra is if you get enough protein, or if you get enough calories, you get enough protein. That's true for most people, but it's not necessarily true for older adults who are not always getting that many calories.
Absolutely.
And so there are these little nuances that you need to just be aware of with different age groups.
Yep. It's also often the case for people who strength train. So sure, they're getting enough protein based on the general population, but these are folks who are strength training at a fairly intense level, not competitive, but very regularly, multiple times a week. They have greatly increased protein needs compared to someone who's completely sedentary.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And so it totally depends. It's very context dependent.
So basically, the protein recommendation is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. Now, because in a vegan diet, we may absorb about 10% less protein, we might bump it to 0.9 or 1. For seniors, what is being recommended now in a lot of countries, Australia, all the Nordic countries, Germany, is 1 to 1.3. And many experts are saying 1 to 1.3. Well, for athletes, especially strength-trained athletes, generally for athletes, you're looking at 1.2 to 2. And for strength training, you're looking at 1.6 plus. And so that is a lot more than
That's
0.8.
Twice more.
Yeah.
At least. Yeah. So it's confusing for a lot of people because protein is context dependent, training dependent, lifestyle dependent, whereas things like iron and zinc have a few things, like maybe pregnancy will increase your need for things like iron, but they're more clear cut.
Yes.
It's like, okay, so I'm this age range, I need this much iron. Whereas with protein, the amount of information that's out there, and exactly what you just said about being variable, it confuses people.
Yes, exactly. And the one good thing about, for example, endurance athletes is they eat so much that it's not that difficult to increase their intake of protein because they're eating so many calories.
Exactly.
Whereas for seniors, they do the exact opposite. They're eating
That's
fewer
a great
calories.
point.
So it makes it a lot more challenging. As an older adult or as an athlete, you really need to think about with each meal, where's my protein coming from? And so if we're taking someone from 40 grams to 70 grams as an older adult, and you'll need more if you're an athlete. We're looking at, okay, I mentioned the breakfast of almond milk and oatmeal and blueberries. Well, you add or you swap the almond milk for soy milk and add a couple tablespoons of hemp seeds, and you've doubled or tripled your protein in that meal.
Right.
You add a third or a half a cup of tofu cubes to your salad and a few pumpkin seeds, and a healthy dressing instead of a fat-free sugar dressing. You add a hemp tahini dressing. You've added 20 grams of protein to that salad. It's really not that difficult. It's surprising to people how little extra food it takes to boost your protein when you're thinking about what are my sources of protein.
Yeah. When we have clients who come in, most of them are vegan already because our whole thing is working with plant-based folks, and they want a team of trainers who get it and who aren't going to push whey protein shakes and chicken breasts and all the rest, right?
Yeah.
Now, some folks have never strength trained before. So they're vegan, but they're not eating a plant-based diet that supports what they want to be doing at the gym. So a lot of times they're only getting 10% of their calories from protein, which might be fine for a sedentary person.
Yeah.
But it's not enough.
It's marginal.
You have to recover.
It's marginal.
It's marginal. Yeah. I guess it depends, but it's pretty marginal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times they're eating exactly what you just described, like oatmeal and berries, and they're doing smoothies, and they're eating all sorts of legumes and grains.
Yes.
So they're not sitting around eating Pop-Tarts all day, but they're still not getting protein.
Yes. And Karina, and that's the other thing. There's a segment of the population when they do smoothies, they'll do smoothies with a fair bit of fruit, and they'll use water as their, as the liquid. Well, you use soy milk instead of water. You add, a quarter cup of hemp seeds. I even add, for my husband, he likes to have smoothies, frozen peas, soft tofu. I don't use protein powder at all, but I get the same kind of protein content as we would get from protein powder by using soy milk, hemp seeds, frozen peas, tofu, those kinds of fairly concentrated protein sources. And it tastes wonderful because it's whole food.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks don't realize how little things can change. Like they're already doing a perfectly whole foods breakfast. They just need to add something. They don't need to do a complete 180 of what they're eating.
Exactly. So simple. Seeds are a little more concentrated in protein than nuts, and so they're a really good choice, especially hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds. Those are excellent.
I love pumpkin seeds. One of my favorites.
They're excellent. And then, of course, all the soy foods. And I know soy has some people are concerned about soy because there's been such a push on the internet to convince people that soy is somehow risky, which to me, soy has so much evidence in its favor.
Absolutely.
We used to think that maybe soy could increase risk of breast cancer because it's like a phytoestrogen and it might, increase cell proliferation in the breast because it's estrogen-like. But in fact, it did just the opposite. It would attach to estrogen receptor sites and keep estradiol, the type of estrogen that does drive cell proliferation, it would keep it out of those receptors. And so we now know that it's probably protective against breast cancer and may even reduce the risk of recurrence of breast cancer. And it's especially the case if you start eating soy as a young girl, that it will reduce your risk. And soy tends to reduce risk of prostate cancer, and it has been shown to be protective against heart disease, and it may help reduce symptoms of menopause. And like I said, I'm 66 years old. I sailed through menopause. I didn't even hardly have a symptom.
Amazing.
But I'm a fairly heavy soy consumer. I like soy milk as my plant-based milk of choice because it's more nutrient dense than other plant-based milks. And I really like tofu. I like tempeh. I make my own tempeh. I like those foods. I like edamame.
Me too. I eat edamame almost every day.
Well,
and
that's
soy
awesome.
milk. Yeah, for 2 of my books, Susan Levin, who unfortunately is not with us anymore, but she contributed a lit review of all the
Wonderful.
research at the time that had been done on soy.
Oh, wonderful.
So there were 2 editions, right? So the first book came out in 2014, and then the next edition came out just a couple years ago, and it was
Oh, that's
reprinted.
amazing.
But it's the same thing. It's health beneficial. It's not health negative.
And I knew Susan quite well and had the greatest respect for her.
Mm-hmm.
And losing her was just devastating. It was such a loss for this entire movement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very sad. And it really is, I think, a testament to none of us are bulletproof.
Right.
We can do everything right. She was amazing. She had a phenomenal diet. She was a distance runner, an incredible athlete. And life isn't always fair. Our genes do, generally, we're told genes determine about 5% of your risk. The other 95% is diet and lifestyle, and that's probably true. But in some cases, genes can be pretty powerful. So,
well, even if it is 5%, that's still
Yeah.
5 people out of every 100. You're
That's
bound to know
right.
someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I found out not that recently, but fairly recently, and I was like, "What?" That's
Yeah.
it's amazing how that happens. It's too bad.
It was just so sad.
Yeah, I'm happy that she lives on in her
She
work
does. Yeah.
and everything that she's done for the vegan movement.
Yeah. She was such an asset for
Yeah.
PCRM as well. And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of things like chronic disease, this is one of the other areas that you work in. What does that look like? Do you work with clients one-on-one where they come to you and say, "Hey, I was just diagnosed with heart disease," or "Hey, my doctor just told me I have diabetes," and then they get you to help them?
So I do a limited amount of that. I did a diabetes course for the Food Revolution Network. I assisted with 2 courses, one completely diabetes and one diabetes and other chronic diseases for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So that's for continuing education for physicians. And so I do a lot of that. I do a lot of lecturing for physicians. Next week, I'm talking to the physicians at Kaiser Permanente in the States. And so I spend a lot of time educating in that way. So lecturing, doing courses, and writing books and articles. I had 2 peer-reviewed articles come out last year, one on hypertension and one with the results of the research that I was involved with in the Marshall Islands on type 2 diabetes. And so I do a little bit of consulting with individuals, but I would say much more of my time is spent educating my fellow health professional.
Amazing. So how does, if at all, how does your general plant-based diet differ when you're looking at a population with chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes compared to someone like me who might be looking to your work, like the plant-powered protein book, for example, for health optimization?
Yes, and so there's a lot of overlap because in both cases, we want the diets to be nutritionally adequate. But when we're talking about people with chronic diseases, quite often, particularly with diabetes and heart disease, we're looking at people who are overweight. And so then when you're trying to reduce calories to restore metabolic health, again, it means the diet needs to be very nutrient dense. And which means, okay, you're eating 15 or 1600 calories and you need to get all those nutrients in. So every calorie needs to count. It needs to be providing nutrition. For example, for someone who's burning 4,000 calories a day because they're an athlete, you can afford to have a little bit of olive oil on your salad if you want. You can afford to have those extras and these things that aren't as nutrient dense, but will provide the sort of dense calories you need to perform. There's wiggle room for all of that stuff. Whereas when you're, limiting calories and trying to lose stored fat, you don't have a lot of room for something like oil that has 120 calories per tablespoon and almost no nutrients. So you're really focused on vegetables and legumes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add in fruits and whole grains, and you get a little more rigid about the form of those foods. So, for example, if I'm dealing with someone with, trying to support someone with type 2 diabetes, I care a lot about what their grains look like. So you can eat bread and, sort of fun flaked cereals or whatever, and it's not an issue. For them, it's more of an issue because I created this thing for people who are trying to reverse chronic disease called the whole grain hierarchy. And so at the top of the hierarchy are grains that look pretty much as they're picked off the plant. There's nothing added. There's nothing, nothing unhealthy added, nothing healthy removed, basically. So you're looking at things like oat groats,
right.
Kamut berries, spelt berries, wheat berries, barley, whole barley maybe, quinoa, those kinds of things. And then the next on the hierarchy would be cut grains. So all you do is cut the grains, like steel cut oats.
Mm-hmm.
And the next would be rolling the grains, like old-fashioned rolled oats. And then would be shredded grains, like shredded wheat. And then ground grains, like whole wheat flour. And then flaked grains. So now we're talking about adding salt and possibly sugar and other things. And so you've made it into flour, and then you've made something out of it. And then puffed grains, which are exposed to 5,000 pounds of pressure or whatever. And so as you go down the hierarchy, you're literally increasing the surface area of the food and the rate that it'll be absorbed into the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
And so you absorb, a puffed grain, like a puffed rice cake or whatever, super rapidly compared to that intact whole grain at the top of the hierarchy. And so for people with diabetes, for people with heart disease, for people with metabolic disorders, you want them to be absorbing these sugars from these foods as gradually as possible. The other thing is, as you go down the hierarchy, you're actually exposing the food to heat, light, oxygen, pressure, and all of those things will impact the nutritional value of the food. So you'll be damaging nutrients in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people with chronic disease, we want to stay near the top of the hierarchy most of the time. For people who are healthy and active, they can afford to play around. Now, and we're not talking about refined grains here at all. This isn't talking about white flour products. This is talking about only whole grains. So when we talk about puffed grains, it's puffed brown rice or puffed, whole wheat. So we're just talking about those whole grains. And so even within the realm of whole grains, there is a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is predicated on the degree of processing of those grains.
That's really interesting. I'm not sure I've come across a grain-specific hierarchy or organizational system like this before. There are a couple with just processing foods in general.
Yes.
Because the word processed, in quotes, doesn't really have a standard meaning. Often we mean ultra-processed.
Yes.
Sometimes we just mean altered in some way, shape, or form. And it could be cooking it. It could be heating it.
Yeah, exactly. There are degrees of processing, and a minimally processed food could be frozen corn, or it could be grated carrots. They're perfectly healthy foods. They're minimally processed. They might be cooked. They might be, you might put them in a blender or a food processor. And everything that was originally there in the food is still there. It's just maybe the particles are smaller and they'll be more quickly absorbed or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, they're still perfectly healthy. Whereas as you get more towards an ultra-processed food, you're talking about taking starch, protein, sugars, and fats and concentrating them. You take them from whole foods, and there's not much of value left there. And then, you put them together, and to make them look and taste like real food, you add color and flavor and preservatives and all kinds of additives. and then you shape them to look like something.
Mm-hmm.
And so these ultra processed foods are so consistently associated with increased disease risk. There was a study from 2024 that showed they were associated with increased mortality and increased risk of 32 different conditions. And they're just not good news. It doesn't matter if they're vegan or not.
Mm-hmm.
Ultra processed foods you want to minimize. And it doesn't mean you can never eat them. There are some systems like the NOVA system that classifies foods according to their degree of processing. And I have some issues with some of those systems because they will put a non-dairy milk, that's a really healthy choice, organic soy milk that's got, calcium and vitamin B12 and such added, but because it's got those things added, they count it as ultra processed.
Interesting.
And they put it in the same category as Coke, or something like that, which is absolutely, in my view, ridiculous. I think that we need to develop another system that takes into consideration the nutritional value of the food,
right?
And really what's being used. So you're using an organic soy milk. The milk's been pressed from organic soybeans. That's a very, very different animal than a soda.
Yeah.
So we really need to be careful of that. Even to meat, and this may shock people when I say this, veggie meats, like veggie burgers and veggie crumbles and all of those things can absolutely play a role in a healthy diet. For seniors, they're so convenient. They're extremely absorbable protein. They're very concentrated protein. They often have iron and zinc added, and they can make the diet even better nutritionally. So they can play a role. And for athletes who are trying to pack in the protein, it's a super easy way to do that. Still, you want most of your protein to come from whole foods like legumes and nuts and seeds and so on. But including some of those foods absolutely can be part of a healthy diet. And so I think we need to be somewhat sensible, use common sense when it comes to evaluating some of the, to evaluating degree of processing of foods. We have to take into account the nutritional value of those foods. You think for children as well, to have a veggie burger or to have when all the kids are having a hot dog, that there's a veggie version of that they can enjoy and not feel so excluded culturally. Those to me have value socially and otherwise. When you invite someone over for a barbecue in the summertime and they're not vegan and they have never even tasted this stuff, to have a veggie patty that tastes so similar to meat, or a sausage that tastes so similar that it could almost fool them, that can play an important role socially, and it can make life a little easier. So I think we need to value that as well.
That's such a great point, because I think a lot of people will just hone in on one ingredient or one type of food, like, I don't know, Beyond Meat, or like a veggie burger, or Eve breakfast links, or whatever. And then they'll pick at that one thing and say, oh, but it contains whatever, and it's not good for you. But what we're missing in a conversation like that is context. What if 85% of your diet is whole foods? What if 95% of your protein is coming from non-faux meats?
Yeah.
Exactly. We can't just look at one thing and pick it out.
That's right. And the other thing that people often don't think about is we need to think about, what is it replacing?
Right.
And so, if it's replacing a hamburger,
yeah,
then wow, what an impressive step towards not only a healthier diet, but reduced cruelty to animals, reduced pain, suffering, and death in animals, a smaller carbon footprint for the planet. There's so many benefits to making that swap. So that's a really good step. And like you say, if most of what you're consuming is beans, and then you have the burger once in a while, I just don't see a problem with that. I think it's a reasonable choice. I mean, when I do burgers on the barbecue or whatever, I make a burger from, it's got grated beets and cooked lentils and ground up walnuts and quinoa and all of these things. And when I make them, I make a batch of 30 and I freeze them, and they're so tasty. I love them. But if I'm at somebody's house and they're doing Beyond or whatever burgers, I'm just really grateful to have a vegan burger.
Me too.
And it's kind of fun. They're tasty. They're, and even at a restaurant or whatever. And to be really honest, my son-in-law's parents are from Bulgaria. They don't speak any English. They live on meat, cheese, and, that kind of bread, that Italian style bread or whatever. They eat a lot of that kind of food. And when they came to our house and we had a Beyond sausage and I barbecued, I made a lot of food, but we had these Beyond. I don't think they knew it wasn't a regulars. I really don't. I made applesauce and red cabbage.
I wouldn't be surprised if they had no idea.
Yeah. And so it just made it so easy.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we have to use what convenient things are available that will make it easier for the people we're trying to impress or have over or whatever.
Totally.
And even cheeses, like some of these cheeses, some of them have coconut oil or whatever, but they are so close to real cheese. They're fermented nut cheeses.
They're getting better.
Or whatever.
Yep,
they're getting better and better. And it just is so nice to be able to have something like that on a charcuterie board. I mean, I make my own, but not everybody will do that or can, feels comfortable yet working with fermenting and so on. So it's so nice that those kinds of things are available, that we can do that today.
Absolutely.
We couldn't 30 or 40 years ago. Like vegan cheese 40 years ago was plastic. It was the grossest
if it
thing.
Even existed at that point.
Oh, it did. There was one that was hydrogenated soybean oil. That was the first ingredient. Mm-hmm. It was disgusting. And so, that's what we had back then. So we just didn't have cheese at all.
Yeah.
You would make a melty cheese with cashews. And I still do that. I love it. Mm-hmm. But that we just didn't have much else. Or the old fashioned harder cheeses that we'd use, the agar and nutritional yeast and things like that. And so that was the other choice. But now we've, gotten to the stage where we're actually producing vegan cheeses
mm-hmm.
using the same techniques that we use to produce dairy cheeses. And so the flavors are very comparable. It's really remarkable.
It's moving in the right direction.
Yes.
Well, Brenda, thank you so much for speaking with me. We are going to have show notes, so we will link to your website, your books, your socials. But it's been great to speak with you.
It's been great to speak with you too, Karina. I really enjoyed it, and have fun with Corey.
Oh, thank you. I will. Brenda, thanks again for joining me on the show. Head to our show notes at nobullshitvegan.com/194 to connect with Brenda. And thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to the No Bullshit Vegan podcast at nobullshitvegan.com.